So it's no secret, I love Daniel Smith paints.
Illustrations by Pete.
But I have been using the Daniel Smith Watercolor Ground for many years. I've used the clear, I've used the white, I've toned the white, and I've also used the black. Now, there's something that you don't see. If you're a gouache painter, most people who paint with gouache, they don't worry about if it's top grade watercolor paper. They just use whatever. But if you use the gouache on top of the Daniel Smith Watercolor Ground, something happens. I think it's because things don't move right, and the watercolor ground is absorbent. It works great for watercolor, but for gouache is different because gouache dries up and kind of shrinks a little bit. So if it's thick, it cracks. The watercolor ground doesn't move. Whereas paper, sometimes the fibers in the paper, they move a little bit. So when you use the watercolor ground on paper, it's fine. Not that you need to use it on paper, but if you're toning the page and you don't want that under painting to come off the page as you're putting more watercolor on top, sometimes people do that. They do the watercolor ground on the paper. It's meant for hard surfaces or, you know, rocks and wood and things like that, but they don't move either. So if something happens, you can only see it with the black watercolor ground. You can't see it with the white, and you definitely can't see it. Doesn't happen at all with the watercolor. Regular watercolor is fine on the watercolor ground. I'm using this not the way I should. As always, I'm abusing this whole thing, but you'll see what happens to it. It cracks at the end. The picture, especially on the yellow, the black comes through the yellow, so you can see it. It's right there. You notice it. So I'm going to do an abstract gouache painting on the black watercolor ground in my sketchbook. It's a good product. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. It's just that you have to use it the right way, and I'm definitely not doing that. After saying all that, are you ready for this epic B-roll? Can you handle it? Okay, stay tuned till the end of the video. Today we are going to have some doodle artwork from Slayer Enton. He sent me some stuff. I'm going to put it up there, and I hope I'm going to give him what he wants. Probably not. I'm bad with the advice on art stuff because of the way that I look at it, but we'll look at that later. We'll look at this towards the end, and I'll let you know where to find him on Instagram, and you can head over there and support him. He's usually does a lot of cartoon work, but this time he sent me some doodle work that is not on his Instagram. So he's looking for some feedback, and if you can leave comments below for him and say, look, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like, whatever the case is, you give him your advice as well. But so I'll go ahead and list his Instagram down below, and you can check that out. The cartoon stuff is pretty cool. One of my favorite things he did was it was like a Gargamel Smurf. It was pretty interesting. I thought it was pretty funny. So we'll check that out at the end. Okay, so I'm going to get into this here, and you're going to start to see everything goes down just fine at first, but you can really see it through the black, which is why I used that instead of the white watercolor ground. And if you're just using white watercolor ground, and I might have said this already in the intro, but if you use the regular white watercolor ground with watercolor, you do not get this effect. But with the gouache, you can see it better on the black paper, the black watercolor ground, than you can the white. So that's why I used it. But I just want you to see how it starts to dry and crack. I think I'm going to do another video just on the black paper so you could see how different that is, how it reacts much differently. I mean, everything starts out smooth. It starts out okay, but as it dries, it cracks and the black watercolor ground comes through. You can just see how it's, and I think it's because it's not sticking to the paper right, because you have the watercolor ground on top of it. That's what's bonded to the paper. And honestly, the watercolor ground is not meant for paper. You're supposed to be putting it on other things that are not porous, whereas in this instance I put it on paper that's very porous, and so it kind of sticks to it and it seals. But I think it would work the same way because it's just the coating itself that's reacting this way with the gouache. So, and of course if I was using watercolor it would be much different. But what I do here is only use white gouache, and then I color it with watercolor. So I'm always adding watercolor to the white gouache to give it a little bit more of a liquid consistency. It's just blending with the gouache a little bit. So, and this is the M Graham gouache, so this is the least dry gouache that I've ever seen. It'll actually stay wet in the palette sometimes for a little while with it before drying, and eventually it will crack just like every other gouache. But for the most part, it stays pretty wet. It doesn't, the white, in my palette it doesn't crack ever because I use the white so often. So, but the other colors will crack a little bit as they dry, just like every other gouache. They're a lot more moist than some other gouache that I've seen. And as always, the big disclaimer here is I'm not using these things correctly. I'm using them the way that I want to use them, even though it's not correct. So, and I have jumped on other artists before for doing stuff like that and then saying, oh, it's not good. But let me explain first, though, because I don't just say, oh, it's not good and I'm using it wrong. I'm saying the way I'm using it wrong to begin with. I know that if things don't turn out right, it's on me. It's all on me. It's my fault. So I'm not blaming the product at all. It's just that this is how I was using it. I wanted to tone the pages a little bit. I wanted to have a black page that I could put some gouache on inside a sketchbook, and I figured what better way to do that than with the black watercolor ground. It's just, it works well, and it does adhere to the page just fine. It gives it a little bit more texture. You can actually, if you were going to do a watercolor or a gouache like this, rather, and then put some colored pencil on top, or just use colored pencil, you probably could right on top of this, or pastel pencil. There's a tooth to it, so you could, and when I put this on, I don't paint it on with a paintbrush because I hate lines, and I want it to be uniform. I don't want to have those streaks in it and lines go in different directions. I just want it to be uniform, so I usually use a little foam roller, and I'll roll the watercolor ground onto the paper, and that's how I would use it on anything. It's how I would do that on a board or on a rock or whatever you were painted on. I would use a roller. I want it to definitely work nicely. There's a clear watercolor ground that I used. I'm going to pop a picture of that up here for a second. And in the clear watercolor ground, I was painting on a tile and painted this kestrel, and it was pretty easy. I used some gouache, you can tell in the white areas there, but most of it is just watercolor. And well, even on the tree though, that little branch, that's some gouache mixed over the top of the watercolor, and that's how I got that texture. So I did use some gouache on here, but not thick where it cracked ever. So then I covered this with the Gamblin cold wax medium, and that's the best way I've found to seal watercolor. You just take a little cloth and rub the cold wax over the top of it, and it seals the watercolor in there and repels water, so it can't get re-wet. If you ever need a way to do that, I like to, even when I paint on paper, watercolor on paper, if I'm going to hang it up anywhere, I hate putting the glass in front of it. I know you're supposed to. It helps with a lot of things, no dust, and you know, it UV protect, all that stuff, if you use UV protection glass, whatever. But I don't like to do that. I like to have it just the paper hanging up just like it was just a regular painting of acrylic or something like that. Just put it up on the wall. And so I use that cold wax medium to cover it. I may have to show you how to do it. If you want me to, let me know. down below. If you want me to show you how to do that and do that on a video, I don't mind doing that. There's several on YouTube already there, but I don't mind doing it as well and showing you how to cover something like that. But just the way that I do it, I might do it different than any other way that is on YouTube. I don't know. I don't really know how I learned. I don't even remember why I did this. I think someone just mentioned it, or I read it in a book. I don't even know. And I just started doing it. But it works very well, and it does seal that watercolor down. It's the wax itself cures, and it protects the painting, so nothing can get to it. It's great. And see, that's the kind of art that I used to do the most of. It was all these animal portraits, especially birds. I love raptors. I love birds in general, but I love raptors. And one of the greatest experiences in my entire life was flying a Harris's hawk. And just, I'll have to include a little thing on that and put it up on the screen also. But it was amazing. My wife surprised me. She said, I think she knows how much I love birds. You go out to the place, they show you around a little bit, they show you the birds a little bit, and then you get to sit there with the glove on. They put a little, well, you know, they put things in your hand that are dead, and then the raptor comes flying out from it's from the far tree line. You couldn't even see hardly where they were, but it was from the far tree line. You just put your arm out and you call it, and the thing comes flying, hovers real low to the ground, and comes up to your arm. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever done. I absolutely loved it. And she got me hooked on that. I love doing that. I always go to raptor centers and things like that, and you know, rehab centers. Most raptor centers, they're rehab centers. They don't catch birds and put them in cages. They are rehabbing the birds. So a lot of times they have a lot of turnover with the birds that are there, or if the birds cannot be returned to the wild because for whatever reason, they take care of them there. But they never keep a bird there that could be released into the wild, ever. They never do that. But anyway, it's an amazing experience. If you ever get a chance to do that, look that up. It's well worth whatever it is for the cost. It's been so long since I've done it, I don't know what the cost is anymore. But I'm going to try and do that this year again. That's something I wanted to do probably 2 years ago, and all that nonsense happened and I wasn't able to do it. We just got settled here really in the house and just wanted to maybe do that a little, but we couldn't do it. I'm going to do it this year. We're going to find a place that we can do it. I think there's a place in, well, it's pretty far north of me, but it's not that far. Maybe like a half hour to 45 minutes away. That's not bad at all. I'm going to go there and try and get that taken care of. But I love it. It's just something I've always wanted to fly a vulture. I've always wanted to fly an owl. And so I might try to get those if I can do that. That would be amazing. That would be wonderful. I'm going to try it. We'll see. Okay, now I've talked about this a little bit before, but I just want to bring it up again. I just want to... It's a little bit different than the last time I talked about it. So anyway, there are some various YouTube gurus and they talk about a bunch of stuff. But listen, there's one that I actually like. He's a good guy. He's just got this chip on his shoulder, and it's almost comical to listen to him. He's like that one like hard character in the movie or the TV show. They're older. They always call everybody a pansy, and they're always talking about how tough they had it, and compared to today's generation and everybody else. And it's kind of entertaining, even though that's not at all what he's going for. But let me just give you an example. I'll use, of course, art as the subject, since that's supposed to be what we're doing here sometimes. So he would say something like, I'd like for you to succeed as an artist in the modern day and live your dreams by sharing your vision with the world, but if you need a steady paycheck, then you should just get real with yourself. Some days you'll have more work than you can handle, and other days you won't have a single project to work on. So don't tell me you want to be an artist if you can't go at least a week with no food, and then you'll be staying up 24 hours a day after that when you finally do get work, and then you'll have to wait a month before that check even comes in. So don't get used to electric or internet or anything else. So I'll be the first to tell you that It's great to be self-employed as an artist, especially since being in the workforce is just so tough, and people take advantage of you, and you're constantly being overlooked for promotions, even though you probably work harder than anyone else in the whole company ever has, and at least that's still how it was for me. And I was paid less than everyone, and I had one less vacation day than everyone else in the company. But at least there was a paycheck coming in every week, and you can't rely on that when you work for yourself. You're an amateur at best when you start working for yourself. You don't know how to raise capital or how to generate business. You can barely handle uploading your artwork on a website more than once per week. You think you have it tough now working for someone else who doesn't appreciate you, but when the whole world hates you and tells you that you suck because they hate your art, and they tell you it's not even good enough to put on toilet paper, let alone to be on exhibit anywhere. And so you want to try and become a full-time artist and love every day you're working at it, and find your community where you can thrive and enrich the lives of others. But when you're living in a box outside of a rundown strip mall, waiting to get your next meal from the bakery who throws out their day-old pastries, don't say no one ever warned you, because you can't say that. If you listen to this video, you listen to me, then you can't say that. Okay, now smash that like button and subscribe for more videos. Have an awesome day. That is what every video from this guy has become. It's almost like a comedic sketch, like from Saturday Night Live or In Living Color. Is that still around? Does homie still not play that? Is there a man still living in a van down by the river? Anyway, look, anyone who's successful will tell you that it's a lot of work. When you become successful and people are coming up behind you and they start to realize for the first time that it's a lot harder than they thought, which is always the case. It's always a lot harder than everybody thinks. That's normal. Don't act like an idiot and think you're being real by going off on someone with a chip on your shoulder. It's actually demeaning to others when you make your struggle more important or tougher, or like you did better, and they're weak and they can't handle it and their struggle doesn't count. Don't do that to people. Don't. It's not right. I listen to the guy, every video just is like that. Just starts going off on people and freaking out about how hard he had it and how everybody else has it better. If he could do it because of how tough he had it, you have all the advantages over him. And I know he doesn't really mean it that. He's a really nice guy. He really wants to help people, really wants to see people succeed. And just the way it comes off it's every single one now. Everything he talks about, that's how it is. And it almost becomes hard to listen to him unless you look at it like a comedy. If you look at it like a comedy, you expect it. You just wait for that moment in the whole speech where he's going to do that. You take bets with your friends. You do whatever. I think it's going to be at, the 3-minute mark. And someone else says, no, I think it's going to be at the 4.5-minute mark. And then you won. And that's what I think the best way to view the content is. But all in all, the advice is good. He has good advice. I'm not going to call him out here because I'm not going to do that. But the advice is good. Don't do that to other people. Don't make it seem like you had it so much rough. When you're going through it, it always seems worse. Always. Because you're going through it. And you're emotionally connected to yourself. So you're struggling and you feel it more. But that doesn't diminish what someone else is feeling. Just don't ever do that to someone. So you can see here where the gouache is kind of cracking and the background is coming through. You can see the black watercolor ground coming through the gouache where it cracked. And I just wanted to do this so that you could see if you were to use this on white watercolor ground, it would still do that. You just wouldn't see it. It would be so much less. But I like the way the black background looks. I really do. I like the contrast. I like the color, the pop in the color when you do it like this. But just so that you're aware that this is happening when you use gouache on watercolor ground, it's rejecting. It's like almost like the gouache is shrinking but the ground isn't, where if you just put the gouache straight on paper, then you would be able to, it would move a little bit. The paper would move just a little bit. It wouldn't have that harshness coming through. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you in the next video, when you do this on regular black watercolor paper, how it comes out. It's entirely different. It comes out completely different, the way that it looks. Now, overall, it's similar, because it's just gouache on a black background. But I just mean the texture itself of the gouache, how it changes when you use the watercolor ground versus when you use the regular black watercolor paper. So that'll be in the next video. You'll see it then. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at Slayer Eaton's art here. So he had some requests. He didn't want me to just say, yes, this looks nice. He wanted me to give him some feedback and what could change, what's better, what's good, what's not good. So, but the thing you have to understand about me is that what I consider good art is something that catches my, it's just interesting to look at. It catches my attention and holds my attention. Sometimes I don't know why. Sometimes it has nothing to do with composition. Sometimes the rules have been broken, but still I can't pull my eyes off of it. So what is good is something that holds your attention. It's something that you look at that you think is interesting. It doesn't matter if it's realism, if it's abstract art, it doesn't matter what it is. If it holds your attention, if you look at it and you say, this is good, I don't want to stop looking at it, that makes it good art, in my opinion. Okay, so let's get to these first couple of pieces. First of all, the thing that works here is that something is recognizable there. You see a tree and you see a face between the two pictures. And then you see all the details. Then you see all the stuff in there. And you've got the same thing here. You've got a monkey and you've got an owl. But they're abstract. So it draws you in and then your brain tries to figure them out. And it just, that's what makes it interesting. It's not for every piece. Not every abstract piece needs to look like something. But when it does, it helps. It helps pull you into it. Now you can see these two take a completely different approach, but the large dark areas, if you have large areas of contrast, that also creates areas of interest and helps to pull you in. So that is what I would say that these two pieces are doing well. Now that's not something I usually do with watercolor, but when I'm just using pen and ink, that's something that I do. I like that look, those large dark spots. That's just what I like. So these two combine a little bit. So notice on the left one there are spots of dark, very dark, big spots. Not very big, but there's chunks there of dark spots, but also could resemble a dog or a lion or something like that. So it draws you in, plus you're looking at the different details. A lot of different texture in these two. The one on the right, same thing, a lot of different texture. The circle on the top part of that, and what looks like in the center of it, almost like little teeth, your mind automatically goes to something that resembles something human. So an eye or teeth or ears, your eyes go to that. Your mind picks those things out all the time when they're not there. Just look at a tree bark or look in the clouds and you always see those kinds of things. So that's what this does here. And last but not least, these are just simple designs, but because they resemble something that your mind can put together, again, it draws you in. They're nice to look at. They have more of a cartoon-like vibe to them. And so if you're into that thing, that's what's going to draw you into these pieces. Now my overall advice is, since on your current Instagram you have a lot of cartoon-like things, they're just cartoon stuff. They're not abstracts. So you can either take the approach that I take, which is, this is me and I'm putting everything out there and I put it all on one account, or if you're trying to gain notoriety for one or the other and still be able to create both, then I would have two separate Instagram accounts, one for the doodle stuff and then one for the cartoon stuff. It's just up to you, but for me personally, I'm not trying to get noticed and find work for anything. I don't know if that's what you're trying to do, but I just put everything in one spot because that's just, I'm putting all of my art in one place. It's just easier for me. It's more simple for me. And so that's what I'm going to do, but you do whatever you think is best for you. All right, I'm going to go. Give a thumbs up to the video if the reason that you want a kestrel house in your backyard is because butterflies terrify you and you want them to eat them. I'll see you in the next one.